Rams house. Welcome into a brand new episode of the Rams Report by Chat Sports. My name is Jackson Durham, and today we've got a couple topics on deck for you. We're going to spend the majority of today's show talking about a few receiver targets for the 2026 NFL Draft. Guys that I think could be good fits with the Rams. We'll discuss what it might look like if they ultimately ended up being the Rams' first-round selection, whether it be at the 13th overall pick or via a trade back for a couple of these guys. But before we get to that discussion and those four names, we got to talk about a little bit of breaking news. The Rams are re-signing Ronnie Rivers today. Depth running back Ronnie Rivers will return on a one-year extension for the Los Angeles Rams, the team themselves being the ones to announce it today, just around noon. And we actually did put out a short about this already. As always, we are on top of Rams breaking news, whether it be with shorts or with our VODs. So make sure you guys are locked in and subscribed, because those of you with your notifications on, I know you already knew about the re-signing of Ronnie because we had you covered on it. But let's break down what this might mean for this Rams team. And I think you kind of start with the depth chart at running back, right? Like it becomes quite interesting because we know this team to be one that is almost universally interested in adding at the running back position in the draft. They have done it every year since 2018. They have added at least one running back in the draft, continuing that pattern last year with Jarquez Hunter, who becomes the other interesting part of this equation. Last year, he sat behind Ronnie as RB4, and I don't know that that's changing with Ronnie coming back. My inclination here was that Ronnie would probably be off of the roster this year, that the Rams would probably let him go, that they would probably look to move in a different direction at the running back position with a new rookie incoming to sit behind Jarquez and play that depth role just in case injuries come up and likely not contribute if all things go to plan, in the same way Hunter did not do last year, and that Hunter would be the bit action guy that Ronnie Rivers was last season, taking just a couple of carries, maybe contributing on kick return duty and potentially even on punt return duty as well. We all know that's a question mark for this team. But Ronnie is back. And now it questions like, is he going to take away all of the carries that Jarquez likely would have had? Are you still going to add in the draft? And I think the answer to both of those questions is potentially yes. I don't think Les Snead is scared off of the idea of adding a running back in the draft. If there's one that he likes in this class, which there likely is, it's a very strong running back class going down the list. It's a good group of guys, and it has some solid depth to it. So there could be some names that are attractive to him on day 2, on day 3, that he might want to add to this Rams team. And I don't think bringing back Ronnie scares him out of doing that. I think what this does set up is a situation where Jarquez Hunter and Ronnie Rivers are competing for their jobs in camp. I bet, and I don't know, that most of this, if not all of this deal that's been given to Ronnie is not guaranteed. That if he can't make the roster in training camp, it doesn't matter that we gave you the one-year extension. We'll say goodbye on the turn of a hat. That's how the NFL goes. It's a hard knock league. But I think ultimately the Rams will carry 4 running backs, and I think they'll add one in the draft. So that makes one of the then 5 guys that'll be in this room, including Hunter and including Rivers, on the hot seat. And I think it's got to be one of those 2 guys at the end of the day. So that'll be something that we continue to monitor as the offseason progresses. Again, not the most consequential situation in the world. Again, we know Kyron and we know Corum are going to dominate the total carries for that group. This is the bit parts, this is the depth, but it is interesting to see how the Rams will ultimately handle that situation going forward. But let's flip gears. Let's start talking about the receiver position. And before we get into the individual targets, I kind of want to hear from you guys. It feels like wide receiver is the consensus best option for the Rams to draft in the first round. As we get closer and closer to draft day, we're less than a month away. It feels like that's where the majority of the Ramillies' heads are at. It's kind of where my head is at. But I want to hear from you. This is your opportunity to sound off. If you agree, if you think wide receiver is the best path for the Rams, I want you to like today's video. And if you don't, if you think there's another position, I want you to leave a comment and I want you to tell me which position you think is actually the one that the Rams should be targeting. Hey, if there's a lot of comments at one position, we might do an entire video just like this one of draft targets at that position. So you guys let me know in the comments what you want to see for the Rams in the first round. If it's a receiver, like today's video. If it's any other position, let me know in the comments. And then, hey, still slap a like on today's video if you're enjoying it. But let's get into the individual targets for the Rams, starting with Makai Lemon. And we're definitely going to start with Makai because this is the guy that we've talked about more than anybody on this channel. Makai Lemon has been, for a long time, heavily connected to the Los Angeles Rams. I think if you were to estimate all of the mock drafts being simulated across America every day, and there's probably millions of them, I think in the majority of them, Makai Lemon becomes a Los Angeles Ram at 13. The fit makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons, even just geographically. He's a guy who grew up in Los Alamitos, California, and attended college at USC. He's never played football anywhere other than Southern California. Why start now? And hey, we know receiver 3 is in need. We've just talked about it. He fills it brilliantly for you. Biletnikoff Award winner in 2025 at USC. For those unfamiliar, that is the award given out to the best wide receiver in all of college football. 1,100 yards, 79 receptions, and 11 touchdowns in his final season of college football, but a producer for the last 2 years. Only 88 yards his first season in 2023, over 2,000 in the last 2 years, and 14 touchdowns. He enters the Rams depth chart as a pretty much day one slot operator. I think this is the way things would look, right? You'd have Puka out on the outside, and we're going to go through this a couple times. And so what I don't want you to get hung up on is the labels receiver 1 and receiver 2. There will be instances where Puka does not have the title receiver 1. Of course, we know he is the number 1 option. What I'm indicating when he is in the slot is just that's where he's going to play the majority of his snaps. But because we know Puka moves all over. He's moved all over the field throughout his time with the Rams. They've used him out wide. They've used him in the slot, similar to how they used Cooper Kupp when Cooper Kupp was on the Rams in his time here. So we know that'll continue to be an element. But if you bring in Makai, I don't think Makai is an outside receiver at the NFL level. At 5'11", 195 pounds, I think he's going to struggle with press man corners, but I think he can kill teams in the slot, especially when you have 2 guys on the outside who demand as much attention as Puka and Davante do. But what if you want Puka to operate the slot? What if you want to keep him, or what if you want to keep Puka in that role and get somebody else to play outside receiver for you? Well, then your guy is Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. Someone we haven't talked about as much, and to a lot of people, he's the best receiver in the class. And I know that may surprise you. That may be an incongruent combination of why have we not talked about someone who is considered the best receiver in the class by consensus? Primarily because, to be honest, I'll say this before we even dive deeper into him, the odds that Carnell Tate is there for us at 13 are not very good. At the end of the day, he is high on a lot of teams' draft boards. He was a stud at Ohio State. His entire time there, he's got a great build to play the receiver position at 6'3", 195 pounds. The catch radius with him is unbelievable, and the tape is just fantastic. He reminds me in some ways, and I'm not going to say if I was doing an NFL comp, I wouldn't comp him to Davante Adams, but there is enough stylistic similarity to Davante Adams that if you did think about bringing Carnell in to the Rams, you know that even though I'm not saying Davante's going to have to be to Carnell what Cooper was to Puka Nacua. That's a unique relationship that you don't get with every player. Not every player is meant to mentor in that way or interested in mentoring in that way. But I think Davante would definitely be able to impart some veteran wisdom on Carnell Tate, some a little bit of veteran savvy to Carnell Tate that helps him get along a little bit faster. Just kind of knowing how Carnell's going to have to win in the league isn't too far off of how Davante learned to win in the league as well. Both of these guys are contested catch nightmare matchups. especially at this point in Davante's career. Think about how we used him in the red zone this year. That could be Carnell's role for a long time. And we've talked about that with Sean McVay over and over again. I think it's a running theme with McVay that red zone play calling has always been an issue for him. If he does have a key weakness, if he does have an Achilles heel, it has been the Rams' ability to execute in the red zone. But last season, we saw that solved by this man right here, and he won't be around forever. Carnell Tate could be your long-term answer to that problem. He plays that role across from initially Davante Adams with Puka playing in the slot, I think is how you see this play out, with Carnell coming in and playing as an outside receiver. So you see immediately, you now have Davante Adams would be your number one outside boundary receiver, but still the number two target in the offense behind Puka Nacua, who would be primarily operating in the slot, but still being easily the most targeted weapon on the field. And then you'd also have Carnell Tate operating the other side, playing that other boundary receiver role, which you could kind of call the Y in this situation. So let's move on. If you're not a big fan of the boundary combinations, you're going to like this draft class in general. If you like the idea of Puka Nacua being a boundary receiver primarily, this is the draft class for you. Because a lot of these guys that we're going to talk about today, everybody except for Carnell Tate, they project to the NFL level to me as primary slots, which I don't think is a bad thing. Concepcion absolutely falls into that group as well. An interesting note about Concepcion, before we go any deeper, me and Mike were actually discussing this beforehand. His name is Kevin Concepcion, and the KC comes from Kevin Concepcion being shortened. So when you call him Concepcion, you're actually calling him Kevin Concepcion, which it's a little Drake May-ish to me, but hey, whatever. He does apparently prefer KC. So we will continue to call him Concepcion, but I do just kind of find that interesting that has caught on to the degree that it has. But again, you're looking at another primary slot receiver, someone that we've talked about a little bit on this channel already, and the role that he could play would be pretty similar to Makai Lemon. I think the good thing about KC, or in some ways the bad thing about KC, is you wouldn't have to take him at 13. He becomes a very interesting question of, I think you could move down. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But the other interesting thing about him is the drop issues. The production at the SEC level is fantastic. 919 yards on 61 receptions with 9 touchdowns at Texas A&M. You go back to his time at NC State at the ACC level, and he was also quite productive. But he's had drop issues everywhere he's been. And that is definitely concerning to me. Bringing in a guy like that, you just got to hope that you can coach those drops out of him. He's electric with the ball in his hands. He's got a little bit of that with what Makai Lemon has. But Makai Lemon, on the contrary, I think he has 3 drops in his entire college career. So it's very much two ends of the spectrum, where KC has, I think, 21 drops in his last 3 seasons of college play. Drops have been consistently an issue for him, not at all an issue for Makai Lemon, but both of these guys are going to be primary slots from day one. I don't see either of them as boundary receivers, so you'd have things running like this, just like we saw with Makai Lemon, but again, someone who opens up things for Puka and for Davante, and who has a lot opened up for himself by both of those guys. Imagine how hard it is going to be to double anybody with this being the setup. And again, I think you could kind of make that argument with all 4 of the combinations that we're going to show you today, that no matter how you do this, no matter who you take, you've made it incredibly difficult to guard an offense that was already the number 1 offense in the NFL last year. And you've added another piece that can take things to an even greater height. But again, with KC, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to take him, if he's your guy, you've got to trade back. I don't think you can take KC at 13. If I was going to take him, I would absolutely move back to do it. I like KC Concepcion. If they do move back to do it, it's going to depend on who you're moving back with and what you can get to move back. But if Makai and Carnell are on the board, it's a difficult decision, in my opinion, to pass up on them to move back to take KC unless somebody's offering you an absolute haul like what we got last year from Atlanta to move out of the first round, where we ended up getting this 13th overall pick that we have to discuss in the first place because of that very smart trade. Lastly, let's talk about a guy who won a national championship last year. Our final target in today's video is going to be Indiana's Omar Cooper Jr. I've said this before. He has been described as the Ramsiest receiver in the entire draft by Daniel Jeremiah, who knows a thing or two about scouting the NFL. Been doing the combine coverage for years and years. He does great work over there for the NFL. And I agree. To a lot of degrees, Cooper would be a beautiful fit in this Rams offense. I don't know if I can quite get on the level of Ramsiest receiver in the draft, but I absolutely see it as an excellent fit. When you look at the numbers with Cooper, you could tell immediately, even if you didn't get to watch a lot of Indiana this year, he was a huge part of what made that team successful. And I think what's notable about these numbers is that they could have been better. There were a number of games this year where Indiana slowed things down to an absurd degree because they were murdering their opponent or pulled their starters very early. The level of domination on such a consistent level from Indiana of its opponents actually limited Omar Cooper's opportunities to produce. So I do think you have to keep that in mind when you look at his numbers, that there were a lot of stretches of games where he was sitting on the sideline watching the second stringers play and still was able to total up these kind of numbers. And he did it last year entirely from the slot. But he did play in 2024 as a full-time outside receiver, or not a full-time outside receiver, as an outside receiver to some degree with a little bit of slot usage as well. And you can see he was so much better as a full-time slot in 2025. And granted, a lot was better about Indiana in 2025 than it was in 2024. Granted, they were really good in 2024 as well, but he did take that big step in 2025. And I think part of that was being more natural in the slot role. I think that's his fit at the NFL level. So once again, you're going to see things kind of play out like this, where Puka's back out on the outside as the number one receiver. Of course, he's always going to be the number one target, but then you have Devontae operating across him on the boundary and Omar in the slot in your zero. So I want to hear from you guys. Which of the four combinations that we've broken down today would be most appealing to you? Which of these receivers would you want to select? Are you going Makai Lemon? Give me an ML in the comments. Are you going KC Concepcion? Give me a KC in the comments. Are you going Carnell Tate? Give me a CT. Are you going Omar Cooper? Give me an OC. Let me know in the comment section down below, which of these four receivers would you most want to see the Rams select in the 2026 NFL Draft? Whether it be right at 13, I think that's primarily the case for your first two guys, or via a trade back, which I think is realistic for the other two guys, KC and Omar Cooper. Let me know, though, which of the four would you want by typing their initials in the comment section. And as always, thank you so much for spending your time with us today here on the Rams Report by Chat Sports. As always, let's go Rams.